The invitation arrived on thick ivory paper, heavy enough to feel like a judgment in Daniel Harper's hands, and before he even read the words, his chest tightened with a familiar ache. It had been 3 years since the divorce. 3 years of sleepless nights and scraped knees and hospital bills and whispered prayers over 3 identical cribs, and yet the past still knew how to knock the air out of him. The envelope carried the crest of his ex-wife's family, polished and proud, and the moment he saw it, he understood what it was meant to be. This was not a gesture of peace. This was a stage being built, and he was being invited to stand on it so others could laugh. If stories about kindness, second chances, and quiet strength matter to you, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive and reaching hearts that need them. Daniel had once been welcomed into that family with open arms and rehearsed smiles, back when he was a promising young engineer and their daughter's future looked secure. But life had shifted in ways no one had planned. The pregnancy with triplets had come like a storm, joyful and terrifying, and when complications followed and Daniel chose to leave his job to care for 3 fragile newborns while his wife retreated into resentment and exhaustion, the cracks widened. Love turned into blame. Blame turned into silence. Silence turned into divorce papers slid across a kitchen table that still smelled like baby formula. The family had taken her side instantly, painting Daniel as the man who had failed, the man who could not provide, the man who ruined their daughter's life. The invitation was to a wedding, his ex-wife's sister's wedding, a lavish affair at a vineyard estate that Daniel had only ever seen in magazines. The note inside was polite on the surface, but underneath it carried an edge, a reminder that he would always be the outsider who didn't measure up. He knew they expected him to come alone, to sit quietly at the back, to be a visible example of what happens when a man falls from grace. They wanted him small. They wanted him embarrassed. For a long time, Daniel sat at the kitchen table staring at the paper while the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Around him, life waited. 3 backpacks leaned against the wall, decorated with mismatched stickers. A pile of laundry sat unfolded because bedtime stories had mattered more the night before. On the counter were 3 identical lunchboxes, each with a note inside written in his careful handwriting, reminders that someone believed in them. His world was not glamorous, but it was full. Raising triplets alone had stripped Daniel down to his core. There were mornings when he moved on instinct alone, braiding hair with clumsy fingers, tying shoes while balancing a coffee mug on his shoulder, answering work emails after midnight because that was the only quiet he had. Money had been tight, pride had taken a beating, and loneliness had crept in during the hours when the house finally slept. Yet through it all, something steady had grown inside him. He had learned patience the hard way. He had learned that love was not loud or impressive, but persistent and exhausting and worth every sacrifice. The idea of attending that wedding stirred up old fears. He imagined the sideways glances, the whispered comments about the single dad who couldn't keep a marriage together, the subtle comparisons to men in tailored suits with impressive titles. For a moment, he considered declining. He considered protecting himself from reopening wounds that had barely healed. But then he looked at the calendar and noticed something that shifted his heart. The wedding fell on a weekend he already planned to spend with his children, and the thought of leaving them behind to face that room alone felt wrong. They were his strength, even if the world didn't see it. Daniel made a decision that night, a quiet one that didn't come with speeches or dramatic gestures. If he was going to walk into that place, he would do it as he truly was, not as the broken version others had decided he should be. He would bring the triplets. The day of the wedding dawned bright and impossibly blue, the kind of day that made everything feel exposed. Daniel dressed the children carefully, smoothing fabric and wiping invisible smudges from their cheeks. They were nervous but excited, sensing the importance of the moment without fully understanding it. As they climbed into the car, Daniel felt the familiar mix of anxiety and determination settle into his chest. He wasn't going there to make a scene. He was going there to stand tall. The vineyard was breathtaking, rows of green stretching toward the horizon, white chairs arranged with perfect symmetry. Guests moved easily, laughter floating through the air like music. When Daniel arrived with 3 small hands gripping his, the energy shifted in a way he felt more than saw. Heads turned, conversations paused. The image didn't fit the story people had been telling themselves. He walked slowly, aware of every step, not with arrogance but with care. The children stayed close, their presence grounding him. Some faces registered surprise, others curiosity, and a few held the unmistakable flicker of judgment he had expected. But something unexpected happened as well. There were smiles, genuine ones, especially from strangers who saw not a failure, but a father doing his best. The triplets, identical and bright-eyed, drew attention effortlessly, their small hands waving, their excitement contagious. As the ceremony preparations continued, Daniel felt eyes on him from across the space, including those of his ex-wife's family. He didn't meet their gazes directly. He focused instead on keeping the children comfortable, offering snacks, answering questions, being exactly who he had always been. In that simple act, he reclaimed something that had been taken from him. He was no longer performing for approval. He was living his truth. Throughout the event, subtle moments unfolded that chipped away at the intended humiliation. Guests approached Daniel with warmth, asking about the children, expressing admiration for his dedication. He shared his story not with bitterness, but with honesty, explaining the challenges of single parenthood and the unexpected joys it had brought. Each interaction felt like a small vindication, not because he needed validation, but because it reminded him that his worth was not defined by a failed marriage or someone else's narrative. The children, sensing the shift, relaxed into the day. They laughed, explored the edges of the vineyard under his watchful eye, and filled the space with a lightness that no amount of social snobbery could dim. Daniel noticed how their presence softened people, how even those who had come ready to judge found themselves disarmed by their innocence. It was hard to mock a man who showed up every day for 3 lives that depended on him. By the time the reception began, the atmosphere around Daniel had transformed. The whispers he feared were replaced by conversations that carried respect. The triplets sat proudly beside him, tired but happy, unaware that they had just rewritten a story without saying a word. Daniel felt something loosen inside him, a knot he hadn't realized he was still carrying. He had walked into the lion's den and emerged unchanged, maybe even stronger. He didn't stay until the end. He didn't need to. As the sun dipped lower and the children's energy waned, Daniel gathered them up, thanked the hosts politely, and left with his head held high. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public reckoning, but there didn't need to be. The quiet dignity of his presence had done more than anger ever could. The attempt to humiliate him had collapsed under the weight of reality. Driving home, the car filled with soft breathing as the triplets slept, Daniel reflected on how far he had come. The road ahead was still uncertain, bills would still arrive, mornings would still be rushed, loneliness would still visit sometimes, but he understood now that he didn't need to prove himself to people who had already decided who he was. His life, messy and demanding and full of love, was proof enough. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the quiet strength found in everyday sacrifices, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach others who need encouragement. As Daniel pulled into his driveway and carried the children inside one by one, the house greeted him with familiar creaks and shadows. He tucked them into bed, brushed hair from their foreheads, and stood for a moment listening to their breathing. In that stillness, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had been tested and had chosen love over pride, presence over pretense. The wedding that was meant to break him had instead reminded him of who he was. Before this story ends, we invite you to leave a comment below sharing what moment moved you the most, or what this story made you feel. Daniel turned off the lights and sat alone in the quiet living room, exhaustion settling into his bones in the gentlest way. Outside, the night wrapped the house in calm. Inside, 3 small lives slept safely because he had shown up day after day without applause. And in that simple, uncelebrated truth, he found something greater than revenge or validation. He found dignity, resilience, and a love that no invitation could ever take away.